Hey guys, in the scenario, we are going to talk about an interesting situation related to risk management. And this is our topic, which is of utmost importance in the exam as well. We receive a lot of requests from our students and customers that we should be talking more about risk management. So here's the scenario. So let me read out the scenario and then we are going to discuss in detail. The situation says that project you are managing requires the rental of equipment. If your primary supplier can't provide the necessary equipment on time, you may need to rent the equipment at higher rates from a different supplier. To address the risk, you have added contingency reserves. Fortunately, the primary contractor provides all the equipment on time with no delays. What should you do next? Option A, update the risk register and release the contingency reserves associated with the risk. Option B, update the risk register and keep the contingency reserve as an added buffer for overall project risk. Option C, inform the project sponsor and stakeholders that all the equipment has been provided. And option D, update the lessons learned register to reflect that the contingency reserve was not necessary. This is actually a very interesting situation and happens in the practical project management as well. Let me find out the important terminologies to focus on. So there's a mention of a risk that if the primary supplier is not able to provide the equipment on time, then the project team may need to contact another supplier and probably they are going to charge you higher rates because of course they would know that their importance has been increased for the project. So this is a risk with a possible response plan. And accordingly, you have kept the contingency reserves with some budgets and necessary cost-related aspects in your risk register corresponding to the risk. Right? So the addition of the contingency reserve to that risk is important. And the other part which is important is that this risk actually didn't occur. So your primary contractor actually was able to provide all the equipment on time with no delays, right? So the situation is not going to occur now, which means that the risk is not active anymore or it's going to retire. Now the situation is asking that in this scenario, what would you do the very next thing? Let's check the option choices one by one. Option A. I'm going to talk about option A and B together. Update the risk register and release the contingency reserves associated with the risk. And option B, update the risk register and keep the contingency reserve as an added buffer for the overall project risk. So when we posted this question on the regular Friday polls, we got a very close tie between option A and B. And the answer is between A and B actually. Updating the risk register is for sure an step. In case a risk doesn't occur or if the primary risk is not valid anymore and like everything associated with that, the reserves, the timelines, the cost baseline, schedule baseline, scope baseline, whatever is going to get impacted should be updated. So the contingency reserve. So first we need to know what is contingency reserve. Contingency reserve is a budget or is it could be a schedule as well. But in this case, we are talking about budget. So contingency reserve is a budget that you set aside for a known risk, right? And contingency reserve, along with the activity estimates and the overall project contingency, is a part of cost baseline. So if a risk is not going to occur and you have kept aside a contingency for that, it is expected that you release the reserve from the cost baseline and you keep the budget integrity for your project, which is option A. However, we have a close, very close option, which is option B as well, that update the risk register and keep the contingency reserve as an added buffer for the overall project risk. So maybe someone would ask that what is the harm of keeping that reserve, which probably is not going to be used for that primary risk, but maybe you can use that for some other risk that may occur later in the project or that may be identified already and you may need some budgetary, capacity in that regard. So that actually would generate two possibilities, that if a risk is not going to occur and you have kept or you have an approval for a reserve for that risk, which now is available. It's kind of saving from for the project. So what is the possible thing? Can we keep that for the overall project risk? Maybe someone would say, what's the harm in that? This is actually going to be a good thing. But something which is already known, like some other risks which are already known, we would definitely have a separate, allocation and contingencies and resourcing, owners, everything related to that. This is how it works in the project risk. And something which is not known, why would you want to allocate a budget, or why would you want to hold a budget for that particular situation which is not known as of now, which is unknown risk? Because contingency is meant for known risk. And for the unknown risk, we have separate provision, which is management reserve, right? Which is a separate budgetary allocation, and it's under the charge of your senior management and sponsors and all. So keeping or holding the budget for something or with the anticipation that if something is going to happen, we are going to use it, it's not your call to make. At least as a project manager, this is not your call to make. This is the senior management's call to make. So your responsibility is just to update the risk register, because the risk is retiring, and to return the reserves or the budget which has not been utilized for that risk, because there was no need. The situation was dealt without the risk management. So between A and B, we are going to keep option A, but we should be checking option C and D as well. Option C, I'm going to talk about option C and D together as well. So option C, inform the project sponsor and stakeholders that the equipment has been provided and the risk is not happening anymore. And option D, update the lessons learned register to reflect that the contingency reserve for this risk was not necessary. Now, these two steps are also very important, but these two steps are not the very next thing to do in the situation, and the question is asking about the very next thing to do. So keeping your stakeholders informed, updated about the risk, and ensuring effective communication is, of course, needed. This is something expected from your side as a project manager, as a project team member. However, this doesn't ensure the financial, taking care of the situation. The question is primarily talking about how to deal with the contingency reserve that you associated with the risk. So the communication aspect, or the only communication aspect, is not going to deal with the situation. And same as the case with option D as well, that updating the lessons learned register is definitely a step that you would do, that because of our effective project management and effective dealing with the suppliers and maybe effective collaboration and all, we were able to actually completely avoid the risk, and the situation didn't occur, and we actually saved the company and the project an amount. This is a very good lesson learned. It's a positive lesson learned, and team would want to keep that for later reference in the other projects. However, again, this is not the very next thing to do. The very next thing to do is to update the risk register, is to return the reserve to your sponsors and to your steering committee, and then you update the lessons learned register, or maybe you inform the relevant stakeholders, which is option C and D. So A is the right answer to this question, and the bottom line is that whenever a risk is retiring, you should be updating the risk register, you should be releasing the contingency reserves, you should be informing the stakeholders and updating the lessons register as well, but as a later step. I hope you like this explanation, and if you do, please like this video, leave your comments in the comment box so that we get to know that if you are liking our efforts or not. I will be seeing you very soon with another PMP scenario. Till then, take care. Goodbye.